Monitor vCenter and administer alarms. Oh, so I guess you could probably call this nugget miscellaneous. There are a bunch of extra settings in vCenter that we haven't touched on yet because you've probably interacted with them. You've probably played with them before, things like resource maps here in the server service and host agent views. You might have even played around with vCenter alarms. In fact, you've probably seen a number of vCenter alarms that have appeared in the demo as I've gone through clicking through various items. If you've been concerned as you've been watching all of these videos and been thinking, wow, there's a lot of red and yellow lights that have been appearing on Greg's screen, you got to figure too that we are trying to run what is effectively three separate vCenter servers or ESX servers in a single workstation atop VMware Workstation. So a lot of these alarms you're seeing just simply because the performance just isn't there. In a production environment, a lot of the red and the yellow dots, number one, you aren't just going to see as many of them, and number two, you'll probably eventually have them tuned appropriately so they make sense for whatever your actual problem thresholds are. Now, I call this nugget miscellaneous because we have to talk about the vCenter server settings, and I want to show you some of the scheduled tasks, and I want to just kind of peek into resource maps just simply because I think they're really cool. Then we want to take a look at the server and agent statuses. All these are sort of monitoring elements that will help you understand what the configuration and the behaviors are in your environment. And then lastly, we'll pop over here into the vCenter alarms and show you how you can configure those alarms and their triggers, because you will probably need to tune them a little bit for what sorts of behaviors your hardware presents into vCenter. The default alarms by themselves are not terribly noisy, but there are a couple of them in there that you may want to disable just to get rid of the red dots and the yellow dots that don't make any sense for what you're trying to do. I do want to start, however, with just a short look here at some of the vCenter server settings, and some of these other configurations that I mentioned are kind of miscellaneous, but definitely important. We've been working here in the vSphere client for a long period of time throughout this whole series, but what we haven't really spent much time with yet is actually configuring the actual vSphere basic parameters. And I leave this to last because in a way you have to understand a lot about vCenter and what all the things do and how they interrelate before a lot of these vCenter server settings really make sense. We've seen some of these before just simply because I've popped in here really quickly so you could take a look through licensing, for example. But I want to go step down through these elements here to give you an idea of what the server settings are and where you may want to make some adjustments to them to make your whole experience just a little bit better. Now, I've talked about licensing. There's no sense in talking again about licensing here. The one setting here that is terribly important is this one called statistics. And when you're popping through and taking a look at your different performance statistics and all the just characteristics of your vCenter environment, these statistics are important. They are effectively a series of roll-ups of that performance information so that as you go backwards in time, you get less detail to the performance information. Okay, it's probably better if instead of explaining this from this location, if we actually go to our cluster and take a look at performance on our cluster. So this is the performance tab. This tab will eventually, as it gathers the one-day summary, give you an idea of what some of the